One interesting side effect of sequels nowadays is that you don't get to follow the same protagonist anymore, or at least not as often as they used to be with some of the most well-known IPs. While I do personally prefer for each sequel in a long-running series to be as standalone as possible, following a long journey for one protagonist also has its own magic. And the Metro series is no exception. Having a long-running journey in trying to survive the treacherous post-nuclear world and seeing if you can find a better life for yourself or your loved ones is one of the times of my all-time favorite stories. Especially since gameplay-wise, you are going through a literal hell, scraping for supplies and facing both monsters and humans, with sometimes the humans showing they can be even bigger monsters. So after crawling through the Metro tunnels for 2 games, where does the story go next for Metro Exodus? This is a whole journey, so let's start right at the beginning. Metro Exodus takes us for the 3rd, and maybe last time unless a 4th game is made, behind the gas mask of Artyom, a now veteran soldier of the Moscow Metro trying to pick up radio signals from the outside. After 2 major adventures where he put his life on the line and witnessed the bleakness of the Metro tunnels, he has decided it is time to find evidence they can leave, and he eventually does, but it comes at a price. A freak accident causes both him, his wife, and his entire squadron of fellow Spartans to flee Moscow on a stolen train. So with no other options, everyone is now on a journey to find a new place to live, one that is not ravaged by a nuclear fallout or hostiles. And this only scratches the surface. The story of this game, like I said, is an entire journey, one full of trials, tribulations, resource management, and most importantly, humanity. More on that later. Gameplay-wise, this game takes the true and tried formula from the previous 2 games and expands it into great detail. Since you are no longer roaming in the metro, the money system has been replaced with a crafting system. Now, I know how it sounds, and I know a number of games have run crafting into the ground, but please hear me out. In this game, you explore and collect only 3 things: metals, chemicals, and gun parts. They work as a currency of sorts, and you can use them to create bullets, healing items, and throwables, which makes sense. With no more stores, all you can do is scavenge, and with their existence being very limited, that particular brand of resource management I love about this series continues to run strong. Now, it may sound like everything is a lot easier since you can craft on the go, right? Well, kinda wrong. In order to craft bullets and apply upgrades to your suit, you need to use a crafting table. Those exist only in safe houses, and there is only a few of them on each area of the game at a time. So every time you reach one, you have to know exactly what you are taking with you. Since both humans and bandits are now more spread than ever, it also means you still need to be able to replenish your ammo in one way or the other. That compromise is in the form of the special weapon. In a little change to the previous 2 games, you can now only carry 2 different guns, and the 3rd slot is being reserved for the special one. I hated that at first, but after fighting it out with enemies so often, the pneumatic gun, the crossbow, and the railgun became the biggest lifesavers of my run. Since we are already on the topic of the combat, let's go ahead and cover it. My personal philosophy when it came to the combat in the Metro games has always been this: melee for humans, bullets for monsters. The main reason is that you stand to gain more from knocking out guards and looting their bodies for supplies. Supplies you sorely need against the mutants since they don't drop nothing at all. Also because usually taking a non-lethal approach also used to play a part in which ending you get thanks to the morality system. For this game, however, the morality system is a lot more lenient on how you face human enemies. The outside world now has multiple factions, so now it's a matter of knowing who to kill and when to kill them. And also to ponder if it's truly necessary or you should just slip by unnoticed. Killing the wrong people or being too aggressive means you risk getting locked into a bad ending, or it can also be a trade-off if you just want to go Rambo on everyone. With that being said, when the push comes to shove and you do have to fight it out with the enemies, the crafting mechanic changes the combat in a way that I've been loving, and that is improvisation. Being able to customize weapons on the go means you can switch weapon parts to suit your needs. You can be stuck in a long-range firefight, take your pistol, and then use the right parts to turn it into a sniper rifle. You can switch scopes or magazine size in others so you can change between close quarters and range fights, or if you are out of regular ammo, you can make up some extra pellets on the spot and bring the pain to them. You have nearly unlimited options on how you wish to fight, and the weapon variety helps greatly. When it comes to the mutants though, the true and tried method continues to ring true. When I say bullets for monsters, I mean every word of it, and the developers also knew it, because they made sure monsters come in many shapes and sizes, and also made sure you will feel good at dealing with them, because they know the kind of hell a certain kind of monsters put us through over the course of the trilogy. The biggest change in this game, aside from the crafting system, is also the level design. 2033 and Last Light were linear games for the most part, but with enough length and depth that allow you to express yourself and enjoy the thrill of surviving in a hostile environment. Exodus ups the ante by making several major chapters into these big open maps. Some have decided to call this an open world game, but to me it feels more like these major levels are hub levels. There is 3 of them, and between each of them there are also the linear levels we are more accustomed to. This means the game has a pretty awesome, if a little flawed, sense of pacing. The hub maps are big, but they are not enormous, overwhelming, and certainly not typical open worlds. In this game, side quests are more like side objectives. You are not exploring to take over territory, you are exploring for supplies and to help out the crew of your train. If you want to, that is. Because that is the beauty of this style of game design. You can go straight for the story, or you can check the depth of the hub world so you can secure some sweet bonuses before you move on. And these worlds are very deep and buried. You can be rowing your boat in the Volga River, braving a storm as you sneak into a demon's nest so you can retrieve a teddy bear, and even have a nerve-wracking experience making sure you don't walk into the path of the anomalies that show up if you are exploring at night. You can be braving a sandstorm in the dried-out Caspian Sea, fighting mutant spiders in a crumbling underground bunker, and then sneak around in the middle of a war between rebels and slave traders. And you can find yourself helplessly lost in the taiga forest, being haunted by either wolves, pirates, or any of the other tribes that have been living there for 20 years and who are already having a civil war of their own, with your presence having even more tension since you're in a conflict that has nothing to do with you or your crew. And I love this. The best part is, as action focused as this game gets at times, the horror and supernatural element is still there. The war that destroyed the world did more than simply destroyed it. It broke the barrier between the worlds of the living and the dead, and the closer you are to areas taken over by nuclear fallout or the mutants, the more noticeable it is. This is something I hold dear. This series always knew how to balance the action, exploration, and the horror elements, so no moment overstays its welcome. And while the supernatural element is a bit smaller in this game due to the time you spend in the hub world, it only makes it hit harder when it actually happens. I wish this had been reflected better on the enemies though. There is only one true weak link in the enemy roster, and that is the humanimals. Or a very fancy way of calling them zombies, because they are zombies. They are very prominent in the first 2 hub worlds, and they are the least interesting aspect of the entire game. I mean, don't get me wrong, in high numbers they are pretty dangerous and terrifying, but during free roam, you only get to face a handful on them, and they do overstay their welcome. I get what they were going for. Some humans get reduced to zombies due to the leftovers of the war, but enemies that rush at you and pelt you with random objects don't make for interesting combat, and instead make for some cheap jump scares as they often lie motionless, waiting to ambush unprepared travelers. The rest of the enemies are pretty great. We lost the Nosaldises for the most part, but the rest of the mutants do their best for what they offer, with the ones living in the more linear segments offering the more bone-chilling experience. You never realize how much you take light for granted until you are using it as a lifesaver against giant mutant spiders, or when you are having to fight off gigantic mutant worms swimming in the toxic sewer water of Novosibirsk. But not everything is combat in this game. As I said earlier, the game is story-driven, and what makes the pacing great is that after you have a fun time exploring the world or going through a major set piece, you get to spend some time on the train with your crew. Or, to put it better, the human factor plays a big part. True to previous entries, Metro Exodus leaves you asking what kind of man Artyom is as he goes through his journey. Looking after your crew is optional, but whether you help them or not does wait until the ending you can get, and even the things that don't affect the ending entirely still make for a really feel-good moment. This is something too many games trying to say a serious story really forget to have. A very important aspect of storytelling and having an emotional connection with the characters in a story is making sure you spend time with them, getting to know them, their story, their hopes, and their dreams. This is what makes the more emotional or serious moments have a bigger impact when they actually hit. Not everything is doom and gloom, and even the bleakest situations need breathing room, otherwise your story ends up feeling like it's trying too hard. Now, remember how I said earlier the game is more lenient on letting you kill human enemies to defend yourself? While it is encouraged that you try the non-lethal approach, the game also takes into account who you kill and how you tackle your situation. Do you show the cultists not all people are bad by rescuing their members from bandits? Do you teach your crew you can be selfless by repaying the local rebels for their help with support against the slave traders? Do you ensure the well-being of your crew by making the children of the forest realize violence isn't always the answer? The fact the game gives you free rein on how to act is a testament of its replayability and how much agency it gives you as a player. It is yet another mark of how great the experience can get. But not everything is greatness, of course. For all the advancements this game makes, it also carries some old design choices that hurt it a little. For instance, all three hub worlds are treated as their own separate chapters, and I do mean chapters as a whole, meaning you cannot start at a specific moment. If you want to replay them, you have to do it from the very beginning as it doesn't really have any sub-chapters available. You could mitigate this by manually saving, but even that carries its own share of issues. There is only 4 save slots, and they are constantly getting overridden by the autosave system, so you are inevitably going to get locked into a certain path. This can mess up some choices, and at worst, it can make you miss on some achievements if you really are looking to get those. It just feels like a more proper manual save system would have worked out better. Even with the shortcomings, I still think this game is fantastic. The replayability means subsequent playthroughs are going to take less time since you already covered what was needed for certain things, and you can then streamline yourself right into the next part of the story. It helps a lot. This is one of the more beautiful games I have played, and the atmosphere is just through the roof. Even the quiet time moments are fantastic, when all you get to do is enjoy the silence after a tough fight and take in the environment. You can tell this game was made out of love, with all of the attention to detail. Whether it is during the day or during the night, you can spend just minutes at a time just taking in the sights. And it's good this game has so much great things going for it, because it sadly has one of the biggest mistakes these developers has made, and that is keeping Artyom as a silent protagonist. In the first game, it made sense to have him being quiet, as he was just a young man being new to a completely unknown and hostile new world. The second game could have a bit more of an excuse, since it is still Artyom being moved by forces beyond his own control. This game, however, there really is no excuse. Artyom is the entire force driving the plot in this game. Everything is happening because of him. Developers have said in interviews they made him silent because they wanted to maintain tradition, but if there was ever a time where we seriously needed a two-way conversations, was this game. You usually don't notice this in most cutscenes since there is often multiple people in it, but when it's only Artyom and one other person, it really starts to show just how much the other voice actors have to make up for his silence. Even if they really wanted to keep him silent, they could have easily made up for it by making dialogue choices. It doesn't have to be one big tree of choices, just give us something, anything to indicate that the characters are not talking to themselves. They were really lucky the rest of the characters are very likable and memorable, otherwise this would have been a very awkward tale. Despite some minor jank, I will argue Metro Exodus is a fantastic third and potentially final entry to the series. It was a fantastic idea to make the story take place over the course of a year. Doing hub maps instead of a big open world was a fantastic idea too, and the story being told was really good for me. This is why I am more than happy to give Metro Exodus a nearly perfect 9 out of 10. For a game made by a small development team, I say they did an amazing job. This is one of those games I will be more than happy to replay, and even though this review is about the base game, I am not done with it. They released 2 DLC chapters and you can bet I will be talking about them very soon. It also makes me wish more developers took this approach instead of the big sprawling open worlds. You can get more gaming hours out of giving players a fairly sized world with varied environments to play around with, instead of copy-pasting everything several times around an oversized map and risk giving your players a burnout. And on that note, I think I'm going to start playing some shorter games more often. I played mostly open world games this year, and after Metro Exodus, I think I will want a little change of pace, because I am ready to take a break from these longer games. There is a lot more of them I want to play and review, and I don't want to risk burning out and ending up hating what I am supposed to be enjoying.